Everyone worships something. You worship something. It could be your family or your job, your education, or a sports team that you love. So what does worship look like? Well, think of football. Supporters of a team are happy to go absolutely nuts about their team. They will scream and shout, they will wave their hands in the air, they will jump up and down. They'll wear their team colours and wave flags. They'll paint their faces and coat their entire bedroom in branded merchandise. They'll know and learn about the players. They'll learn and sing songs. They'll pay money to see their team play, and they'll hug complete strangers who support the same team as them. They will talk about their team with anyone who will listen, and they will passionately defend their team. That is proper devoted worship. We all have something like that we worship at some point. We'll go to the same extremes, worshipping singers or film stars and celebrities. Sometimes it's a partner or our children or parents. Probably more commonly ourselves. When we worship something, we are completely prepared to be mocked by our friends for admitting that passion. We are prepared to be mocked for our passion, for that thing that we hold as number one in our lives. And it's very hard to hide what we worship. Naturally, a change will take place in us as we focus so much on this one thing. People will notice that passion within us for that thing. A change happens within us when we worship. Worship is really natural. In all cultures and societies, we see humans worshipping something. So it's fair to say that humans were made to worship. And for so many people to direct that worship towards a God who is worthy of devotion, who's got our best in his plans, I don't think that's strange at all. Christians worshipping God is normal. The most important command God gives to us is to not put anything or anyone else before God. We're told to keep God as that thing that is our number one. Over to Alex.
Worship is one of those words that comes loaded with lots of different meanings for different people. In a church context, very often if you say the word worship, people immediately think of singing and music and arms in the air and that kind of stuff. And that's fine. I mean, that is part of what worship means. No problems with that at all. But of course, worship, like many of these concepts, is much deeper than that, and if we get to the root of it, it takes us right back to the Ten Commandments, and we read in Exodus 20 where Moses is hearing from God these commandments that are meant to set the basis for life of the nation of Israel. And in chapter 20 of Exodus, verses 1 to 5, we find the following. Then God gave the people all these instructions. I am the Lord your God, who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. You must not have any other God but me. You must not make for yourself an idol or any kind of image of anything in the heavens or on the earth or in the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. The entire family is affected, even children in the third and fourth generations of those who reject me. But I lavish unfailing love for 1,000 generations on those who love me and obey my commands. This can sound unduly harsh, this idea that God punishes children for the sins of their parents. Certainly in the New Testament we see that Jesus takes the punishment on himself that would have otherwise been passed down the generations, but there's certainly still situations where actions of parents have a direct influence on their children. You can think of things like abuse, for instance. Abuse would be a sin that has a direct effect on the children. It's not God's intention, and God's not deliberately punishing people for that, but there are consequences to actions. But how does this relate to worship? Well, God's talking about here having no one else as the person to worship, setting up no other gods apart from him. Is this because he's insecure? Is it because he feels that unless he's constantly worshipped and adored, his self-image and self-worth declines? Clearly not. God doesn't need worship in that sense. But worship is good for us. When we're in the right relationship with God, when God is who he should be, the number one in our lives, our king, the person we follow, then our life is better. We're in the right relationship with him. And so the way we react with and interact with other people is better. The way we see life is better because we're seeing it in the right perspective and from the right perspective. Jesus says the following. He's in this passage where he's referring to himself as different things, and here he refers to himself as the Good Shepherd. And he says this in John 10:10, that the thief's purpose is to kill and destroy, but my purpose is to give life, and life to its fullness. And again, it's this idea that if we're in the right relationship with God, then life is full and it's free, and we're free, and we're filled with the best things of life because we have this idea and our lives are centered around God. He is the center of our lives and we're circling around him. And part of that, in fact, the key element of that is that this is our worship. We come to him because he is the center, he is our king, and we worship him because of that. And of course that can involve music, and it can involve prayer, and it can involve walking around a park and praying. It can involve all these elements of life, and it should involve all these elements of life. Worship of him should be the center of what we do.
Apart from the obvious when I'm playing in church.
I mean, a big one for me is through music. I love singing, I love worshipping through song and through music, so that makes natural sense to me.
I think it's important that worship is the whole life. When I remember, I will quite often say to God, I'm doing this for you as an act of worship. It might just be shopping for the neighbour, or helping a friend, or praying or singing, whatever it is. I'll give it to him as an act of worship.
Worship is a great way of showing our love and our respect to God. It can basically be in any part of our life.
Serving people through church, through community, through family, through friendships.
So I work at Nando's and I clear tables, I pack bags, I do a job that I didn't think I'd be doing 6 months ago. But actually what I've chosen to do is to worship God in every moment. So when I pack a bag, I genuinely am packing a bag and saying, Jesus, this is for you.
And then I think it's also how you act around other people, just being godly in the way you choose to present yourself to others, I think is a way to worship God.
I see my work as a real aspect of worship, and that's the day-to-day stuff.
Well, I love worship, and the obvious way is sung worship, when I play my guitar and just be involved in that kind of worship. But also I try to honour him in the way I work, and in the way I am as a husband, in the way I am as a father.
So obviously we all have different roles, don't we? So I'm like a mum and a wife and a childminder. So I try to do the best that I can do in each role that I feel God's called me to do.
There's a sense in which the whole of life I try to worship God. Worship is making God worthy of everything that I do.
Well, in my opinion, worship is just showing your love for God. And you can do that in any way. Singing, for me, it's just playing music all the time. But again, you can show your love for someone in any way, and it's the same with God.
Worship of him should be the centre of all we do. Now, what does that look like? It looks like following Jesus. Following Jesus. Sometimes instead of the word Christian to describe myself, I prefer disciple or Christ follower, because saying I'm a follower of Jesus explains so well who I am. We're saying that he is worthy, saying that we are worshipping him with our whole lifestyle. Practically, how do we do this? Well, it's not vague and hope for the best, neither is it a rule book for us to trip up on. It's to imitate Jesus. Do as Jesus does. Live as Jesus lives. This way of instruction makes so much sense. Just like a dance routine, we can't learn just by someone describing it to us. We watch someone doing it and instantly we are able to imitate them and do the same, or near enough. It's far easier than learning from an instruction manual. Imitate Jesus. In the book of Ephesians in chapter 5, it says, follow his example. And so we can look through the whole Bible for how Jesus acted and see loads of different things. For example, when it came to money, instead of a desire to accumulate money and stuff, Jesus didn't do that. He relied on others. He taught generosity. In our culture where we're pretty obsessed with sex, we see Jesus who wasn't. When it came to politics, Jesus didn't choose a political party, but he still cared deeply about the issues that people were facing. And Jesus attended parties. In fact, he was the life of the party, but not for consuming alcohol, but to focus on the people. Learn about Jesus and imitate him. That is the best advice I can give. God cares deeply about every aspect of your life. He isn't waiting for us to mess up, but he knows what is best for us. As we follow Jesus and imitate him, we show God that we love him, and through that worship we get transformed. We change, a renewing of our minds. Singing worship songs is culturally relevant. It's a way to express emotions and devotion to God naturally, just like people worshipping at a sporting event. It's natural for us to sing and dance and shout and wave our hands and go a little bit nuts sometimes as an act of worship. This is an act of worship, out of a life full of decisions that we can make to worship God, to show devotion to him, to follow and imitate Jesus.